Whether if it's in cartoons or movies, the famous character Shaggy from Scooby-Doo is quite the character. Now let's get into the nooks and crannies of this complex character and talk about his brain. Let's start with his eating habits. I think we all know by now the famous snack called Scooby Snacks, which Shaggy and his best friend Scooby-Doo are obsessed with, along with other foods of course, but let's not talk about how obsessed he seems to be with food. Shaggy seems to have an incredibly tiny prefrontal cortex because he is almost incapable of reacting normally to social situations when there is food around, to the point where he basically ignores the dangers or monsters around him. Matter of fact, Shaggy also has an overreactive hypothalamus because his hunger is constant. He literally has the appetite and stomach capacity of a blue whale. Along with having a small prefrontal cortex, Shaggy also displays the effect of having a small frontal lobe. This is seen with his lack of problem-solving skills and concentration. While he does lack the previously mentioned brain functions, Shaggy's sympathetic nervous system is almost perfect. Shaggy's flight or fight response, while being slightly delayed, is fully functioning and enables Shaggy to immediately exit whenever there is danger around. You can practically see his heart pumping out of his chest. For someone with the delayed reflexes, Shaggy has an amazing cerebellum. The extremely fast takeoffs prove that he has great balance and other voluntary movements, such as moving your legs into the motion of running, even if he was just laying down. Another amazing thing that Shaggy has is his limbic system, as his capabilities of feeling emotions such as fear is perfectly intact. In fact, Shaggy could be a coward. He is a coward. Shaggy also has a functioning temporal lobe, as he, being the most paranoid character on his team, always has his ears out for any spooky monsters trying to get him. Although Shaggy is a cowardly scaredy cat, when he is busy, he rarely ever sees the monster, even if it's right behind him. This shows hints of a very poor occipital lobe, as he should be able to see these huge monsters. Now, determining Shaggy's reticular formation progress really depends on if there's food nearby. If there is food nearby, then you can count Shaggy out for being alert and ready to go at a short notice. Now, if there isn't food nearby, you can be ready for Shaggy to be the first one on the run whenever there is even a hint that a monster is near. Finally, let's talk about Shaggy's cerebral cortex. I think it's obvious by Shaggy's eating tendencies and blasé attitude what Shaggy does in his free time. But his hobbies also affect his memory. Shaggy is awfully slow at processing information in times of panic, or any time for that matter. This is a reaction to his poor cerebral cortex. Now that we have completely disassembled Shaggy's brain for 5 minutes straight, let's talk about his development. According to Kohlberg's level of moral thinking, Shaggy would be at the pre-conventional mortality-focused stage of development, which is when kids before the age of 9 obey rules to avoid punishment or gain concrete rewards. Scooby is at this stage due to his ability to be won over and convinced to take or do actions with the promise of a Scooby snack. So, sorry Shaggy, but you're no higher than a 9-year-old when it comes to your development. According to Piaget's theory of cognitive development, Shaggy would be confined to the sensory motor stage, which is a stage where children learn that even if objects and events are out of the range of their senses, they continue to exist. They also learn at this stage that they can get pleasurable results by performing certain actions. Shaggy could be considered for this stage because he knows that even though he can't see the monsters every day or in a current scene, that they still exist. This is also called object permanence, by the way. He also does tasks such as being bait because he knows that he will get the pleasurable result of a Scooby snack in return. Shaggy could be also considered for the formal operational stage, which is when children ages 12 to adulthood gain the concept of abstract reasoning, abstract logic, and the potential for moral reasoning. Shaggy would fit into this stage because although he usually only acts when he has the incentive of food, he still knows that he is fighting a good cause, the cause of ridding evil from people. This is a pretty moral fight if I do say so myself. Finally, according to Erikson's theory of psychological development, Shaggy would be at stage 5, which is adolescence, which is when people, usually adolescents, try to figure out who they are and how they fit into society. Shaggy fits this stage because he has now found his group of people, aka his friends, and now learned his role in this group and in life for the time being. Well, now that we are finished with the nitty-gritty internal functions of Shaggy, let's talk about his intelligence. This should be a quick one. Okay, so Shaggy does not seem to have the G factor or general intelligence that Spearman theorized. For general intelligence to work, you have to be good at one thing, which would then cause you to be good at a number of things, such as verbal comprehension, verbal fluency, word fluency, facial visualization, memory, inductive reasoning, etc. The only thing that Shaggy seems to be good at is putting away ridiculous amounts of food and cracking jokes. Therefore, Shaggy has no real general intelligence. On the other hand, Shaggy would most likely correlate with Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, which is the theory that there is no single unified intelligence, but instead several independent intelligences arising from different portions of the brain. Shaggy indicates having high levels of linguistic and intrapersonal intelligence because he is acutely aware of what he wants, which is usually food, how he feels, which is usually hungry, and is able to communicate with the others around him. Out of the three types of intelligences in Sternberg's triarctic theory of intelligence, Shaggy would test the highest in the creative intelligence category because of his imaginative and innovative problem-solving ways. Surprisingly, Shaggy would also score high when quizzed on his emotional intelligence. He is very self-aware of his own emotions as he verbalizes being scared constantly. His self-management is admirable. Even though he is terrified 99% of the time, he still manages to adapt to the situation and have a positive outlook on everything. He is also able to show empathy for others, which is why he helps solve mysteries to save people. Next up on today's character analysis is motivation. Let's dig into what drives Shaggy to do what he does. This should be fast and easy because all he cares about is food. By now, we should all know that the instinct theory is the theory that human behavior is motivated by automatic, involuntary, and unlearned responses. Shaggy displays the trait of having extrinsic motivation of acting as bait when given the promise of receiving food or any other types of treats. The drive reduction theory is the theory that motivation arises from imbalances in homeostasis. Homeostasis is the tendency to maintain a balanced or constant internal state. Shaggy has an incredibly strong primal drive and psychological need of hunger. Moving on to the optimum arousal theory, this theory states that we seek to attain optimal arousal level because by achieving the optimal arousal level, we can perform at our best. We know that we have reached the optimal arousal level when we are comfortable physically, emotionally, and intellectually. According to the Yerkes-Dodson law, the increase of Shaggy's mental and psychological arousal levels increases his performance and enables him to perform acts such as sprinting. Last but not least on this motivational journey is Maslow's law of needs. This theory by Abraham Maslow states that people are motivated by 5 basic categories of needs: psychological, safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Okay, let's get into it. Shaggy obviously cares that his psychological needs, such as his need for hunger, thirst, and relief of pain. He also shows a lot of care for his safety needs as he never stays in a place where his life could be in danger. We're not going to mention the fact that he puts himself in these situations. The only stage that Shaggy doesn't seem to care about is his esteem needs, because he doesn't have a huge ego where he needs to be the center of attention 24/7. He does care about his belonging needs, as he obviously deeply cares about his friend group. He also cares about his self-actualization needs, which is his need to fulfill one's potential, development potential, do what you are best suited for, discover the truth about yourself, create beauty, produce order, promote justice. He literally saves people from monsters. That's pretty justicey, if you ask me. Next up on this very invasive psychological evaluation is emotion. Emotions are such a subjective thing, but these psychologists think that they have it down pat. Let's start with James Lynch's theory. This theory states that we feel emotions because of the actions that we do. Let's say that Shaggy got into a fight with a group of friends on whether they should take a break from monster hunting to go on a food tour. His hands begin shaking, his face turns red, and his heart rate increases. Shaggy is feeling the emotion anger. He did not get into the fight because he was angry. He feels this anger because he got into the fight with his friends. Moving on to the Cannon-Barth theory. This theory says that we experience arousal and emotions happen at the same time. For example, Shaggy witnessed the entire Scooby-Doo gang perish while fighting a monster that they couldn't defeat. His heart slows down and feels heavy in his chest. He begins to feel tired and hopeless, and he starts gaining weight. Over time, his serotonin levels drop, and he goes to the hospital. Shaggy was feeling the emotion sadness, which then led to the disorder depression. The two-factor theory is a pretty simple one. It states that in order to feel any emotions, you have to 1. Be physically aroused, and 2. Cognitively label that arousal. Let's apply this to Shaggy. Shaggy has gotten lost in the woods while looking for clues when he hears a large animal growling behind him. His heart begins to pound, he begins to sweat, and his eyes get really big in his face as his sympathetic nervous system starts up. While feeling these reactions, Shaggy thinks, "Oh my gosh, I'm freaking terrified right now." Then Shaggy feels the emotion fear. Finally, let's move on to the Lazarus theory, which is cognitive appraisal without awareness defining emotion. Let's say Shaggy is in an abandoned cabin in the mountains looking for clues on an ice monster that has been terrorizing famous ski stars when he suddenly hears a chair fall. He immediately freezes to see whether he needs to run from someone or if he can proceed because the chair fell naturally. Well, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Goodbye.